I'm Pastor George Borghardt, and this is another Higher Things video short. Pastor Borghardt, thank you very much for your video debunking that I could decide for Jesus. Dead people stay dead. You're welcome. Could you please help me with the Lutheran perspective on these verses, Revelation 3:20 and John 1:12? Sure I can. This gives us an opportunity to take a look at 3 dare-to-be Lutheran rules of interpretation, sort of the rules of the road when dealing with your friends. And the first dare-to-be Lutheran rule is, if you hear something which doesn't sound like what you learned in catechism or what you learned in Bible class or what you learned preached, that doesn't sound Lutheran, check the verse above it and the verse below it. The verse above and the verse below. And it should normally work itself out. Here, the verse specifically in question, John 1:12, to all who receive him, who believe in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Initially, if you took that verse all by itself, John 1:12, you'd think, well, okay, if I make a decision for Jesus, then I make myself a child of God. But you have to keep reading. Those who were born, not of blood. That means I wasn't born a Christian. I may have sat in this pew all my life, but I was not born a Lutheran. I was born a heathen, unbeliever, hater of God, dead in my trespasses and sins. I was made alive at the baptismal font. Who were born not of the will of the flesh, which means, or the will of men. I didn't decide to become a Christian. I didn't make my decision for Jesus. I have decided to follow. No! I was born of God. I was not born of blood, not born of the will of the flesh, not born of the will of men. I was not born of my own. Instead, I was born from above. And born from above is baptismal language. Born of God, baptismal language. And all of this is not about you anyway. It's about the one who from his side flows blood and water, the Word who became flesh and tabernacled amongst us. So, dare to be Lutheran rule 1 in interpretation, check the verse above and the verse below. Now, the second verse that you asked me to look at, which is Revelation 3:20, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him. Also gives us the second rule of dare to be Lutheran interpretation, which is always check the context of who's being spoken to. Context is really important. It's really the same rule as the previous one, but with a twist. Who's being spoken to is very important. Here, in Revelation 3, Jesus is speaking to the church in Laodicea and other churches of the 7 churches he addresses in chapters 2 and 3. He's speaking to the church, those who are already in the faith. If you take the verse out of context, it looks like Jesus is saying, well, I'm outside your door. I keep on knocking, but I can't come in unless you let me in. Or the sort of pictures which have the Jesus outside the door, classic picture, but the door doesn't have a doorknob because he can't come in unless you let him in. Except for the fact that Jesus seems in John's gospel, to John 20, to be able to pass through locked doors. In fact, that's the only way we're going to be saved, is unless Jesus goes through that door for us and for our salvation. He is speaking to those already in the faith, those who already believe, those who are already been enlivened. And his words enliven us to faith. His words enliven us every week to get up and to go to church. Another very classic verse that's used here is, choose you this day whom you will serve. Me and my household will serve the Lord. That is, as my notes say, Joshua 25:14. That's also spoken to those who are in the faith. It's not spoken to those outside the faith. It's spoken to those who have been covenanted. I made that a verb. Those who have been splashed by the blood of the covenant. They're already children of God, brought out of Egypt into the promised land. So the words enliven us to faith. First rule, check the verses above and below. Second rule, check the context. It's very important who Jesus is speaking to. Here, those in the faith. And the third rule of dare to be Lutheran interpretation, quickly, less than a minute. If those don't help you, check with your pastor. That's what he gets paid the big bucks for, if you know what I mean. Or the little bucks in this case. So, First rule, check the verse above and below. Second rule, check the context of who's being spoken to. Third rule, check with your pastor. Keep reading the scriptures. Keep battling with your friends, civilly, of course, and keep on daring to be a Lutheran and reading the scriptures as you do it. I'm Pastor George Borghardt, and this has been another Higher Things video short.